This episode may contain language or discussions that may be offensive or triggering. Refer to the episode summary for details. So, welcome to the SheConfidential podcast. My name is Charlene Ketchum, and today I'm chatting with Therapist Tiff. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist. And y'all, today, oh my goodness, we are going to be talking about the independent woman, the strong independent woman, and how that can be a burden, and how that can create some challenges when it comes to making space for a partner. And I got so hyped when we were just talking because, there's all these memes that circulate on social media.
Yeah.
And, I like social media because, people always complain about it. But, if you look at some of it, it can start some really great conversations if you're willing to go deeper and just really hear what other people have to say and examine yourself.
Right.
And so one of them, I saw a post, actually my sister posted it yesterday, and it was saying about submissive men. So let me, I'm going to pull it really quick so I don't misquote this, but it was, or submissive women. So the premise of it was just about this expectation that some men might have for women to be submissive. So the post said, y'all want a submissive woman, but forget you have to be a righteous man. Being submissive does not mean to shut up and sit down when you say so. It means to trust you to lead, protect, and provide. No woman is going to submit to a man who lies, acts controlling, or can't meet her emotional and spiritual needs. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, a lot of women really liked that and felt that. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have to mention that to Therapist Tiff tomorrow because I feel like there's so much to unpack in there, how we define submission and our expectations as men and women.
Yes. And it's interesting that the post was saying like men want a submissive woman, right? Because they may want a submissive woman, but then also if we appear as Black women appear too vulnerable or weak or not able to hold our own, then they don't want that either. So it's kind of like, which role are we supposed to fill? And can we fill both without losing ourselves?
That there is the challenge. Mm-hmm. That there is the challenge. And that's the challenge. I mean, because so many of us grow up being told not to depend on a man. And so we're taught how to do everything, a lot of women, from how to cook, how to run a house, where to go to get your car taken care of, all these different things, because we're taught you may not have a man there who's going to be able to help you with those things. So you have to be able to fend for yourself. Mm-hmm. And so how does this impact the mindsets of young girls and women as it even pertains to relationships with men?
Yeah. I thought about this a lot because as a woman, I struggle with this as well, right? Mm-hmm. I've always been told that from all of the women in my family to even my own father told me, you are never to depend on a man. You're always supposed to be able to hold your own and make your own money and create your own life, right? Mm-hmm. But I think the messages that we receive from our elders, they lend to women having a distrust for men. That idea that we can't depend on them gives the message that Black men can't hold space for us, that they don't know how to support, encourage, and don't have the capacity to hold space for us when we are struggling or not at our strongest or just need some additional support. And it's that impacts the way that we interact with men in relationships, right? We show up in our relationships in a way that is difficult for men to figure out how to interact. What is their role? How do they show up? Do we want them to hold space for us or not? Right? So I thought about that a lot, and I just kept coming back to the idea of trust, and that's really what I see as like the biggest struggle in hearing those messages over and over again.
Yeah, and from personal experience, I absolutely agree. From personal and I used to work in family law for a while, and then just even just seeing it with experiences of my friends.
Yeah.
And the trust even starts before we start dating,
Yes.
because I know for me, like my dad wasn't consistently in my life. I had a stepdad who was a great stepdad until he wasn't. He developed some personal issues and then he was no longer.
Mm-hmm.
And then my uncles and so forth. For me, I had a pattern in my life of seeing men who were inconsistent.
Mm-hmm.
But the women were consistently always showing up and showing out as
Yep.
Black women do.
Yep.
And so the messaging to me was, okay, I have to grow up and be that woman who
Mm-hmm.
can take care of myself and take care of whatever messes the men make or leave behind, because I can't depend on a man to be there consistently. And so that also gave me the mindset that not only can I not trust them to be there, but I have to kind of create this wall, this protective wall, so that you can't put me in any situations or do anything to me that threatens my security or stability. And it's really hard to be vulnerable when you're busy building walls.
Very.
But it's like you said, that trust factor, like for me, I know it was eroded very early in life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, even the messages, like you were saying, like you saw the women in your family just show up and show out. So even though the messages may not have been verbally told to us, the
Right.
way that the women in our lives have conditioned us to behave, react, is basically that idea that like you have to just do it. You no matter what, you have to show up, you have to get it done. It is your
Mm-hmm.
responsibility and there's no room for error.
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the traumatizing
Right.
part, because it's like you do this, it could just mess up your whole life. Or, as my friends and I, we talk about it a lot. Like I believe that we carry scars, or we grow.
Yeah.
We can grow, or we're going to be scarred from every relationship that we
Right.
have, whether it's like family or friends or an intimate partner. And I think a lot of times what happens, and this happens with men and women, but I'm speaking specifically about
Mhm.
women because that's kind of the focus of this
Yeah.
discussion. But a lot of times what happens with women is we have a series of disappointments, whether it starts with our fathers or other men, that it's not sexual relationships,
Yeah.
but these are the men that we're supposed to be able to count on, and those are disappointments, so those are
Yeah.
scars. So then we start dating,
Mhm.
and because nobody teaches us how to date or teaches us, how to communicate our needs or even recognize our needs,
Yes.
we get in these relationships and we get scarred to more and scarred to more.
Mhm.
So then we end up meeting somebody who might actually be a really great guy and he's well healed, but we got all this baggage now,
Yeah.
because now I'm bitter. Now I don't trust you.
Mhm.
And you want to talk to me about submission? Yeah, I ain't feeling that.
Mm-mm.
Because you got to do all this stuff.
Right.
Because I have all these wounds. So you got to bandage all these wounds now before I can trust
Yeah.
you to even think about submitting to you. And it has nothing to do with that man
Right.
whatsoever.
Yes. And then there's a whole nother level of shame and blame that comes with being able to let your guard down for someone and then being taken advantage of, right? Or someone not living up to the expectation or not being able to meet your needs, then it's left to you, on you to say, well, it's your fault as the woman. It's your fault because you should have known better. It's your fault because you
Yeah.
knew you couldn't depend on that man, and then we
Yeah.
carry that into the next relationship, or
Yeah.
into the, even not even relationship, if it can also just be in any interaction you have with a man, right? Sometimes those wounds and those scars are so deep that it doesn't even have to be someone that you have relationship with, that you have distrust for, or that um you carry out the feelings of those situations where you didn't get what you need. That can be in a regular conversation with a man, right? That can be in the grocery
Yeah.
store with a man who's, in your way, or saying something slick, or, being disrespectful. All of that is
Mhm.
coming out in that one interaction from everything that you felt before that you never expressed, or that you
Yeah.
didn't feel like you could express with the person that was actually the the um the person that actually created the issue.
Yeah. And I appreciate that you mentioned that because I think sometimes, we downplay or dismiss or disregard how certain things can be triggers. I don't know if that's the right word to
Mm-hmm.
refer to
Yep.
that because I have seen or heard of people being snippy. Like one of my
Yeah.
buddies, she's so funny because she's so passive aggressive, and she knows it. When we talk about this, her being passive aggressive, but sometimes she'll snap on somebody, and I'm like, now you ain't
Ain't
gotta
got
do it.
nothing to
It
do with
wasn't even
that
about
person.
that, but it's about
Yep.
everything before that.
Yep.
Everybody and everything before that. And sometimes, we all have our days when it's like,
Yeah.
today ain't the day for somebody to come at me like that. And that
Right.
might be the day that you snap on that guy who,
Yeah.
jumps in front of you in line and you like, you know what y'all mean? Always trying to jump in front of
Mm-hmm.
somebody. Like, you don't see me,
Yep.
you don't see me. And it's not that
Yeah.
he didn't see you. It's because
Right.
somebody else didn't see you and hurt you. And so you feeling some kind of way today.
Right. Yeah. And that's, I mean, that's a level of trauma, right? Like you're
Yeah.
carrying those experiences and those hurt feelings and those um missed opportunities for someone to have held space for you. You're
Yeah.
carrying that around all day long, every single day, within
Yeah.
every interaction. And so if you're not taking the time to process what you're feeling, if you're not taking the time to even acknowledge and be honest with yourself about how those things impacted you, they will come out in other ways. And they always do.
That there is the rub.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How do we know if we're dealing with trauma? Because a lot of women, especially successful, high achieving women, when you rocking it out professionally, you look good, you in the gym, you living your best life. They don't think because they're not walking around like crying. Some people think I'm not crying, I'm not laying in the bed feeling depressed. So how do people know if they actually are dealing with trauma?
Yeah, I think that's a loaded question because it's different for everyone, right?
Right.
Some of us, our tolerance for being able to manage things is higher than other
Yes.
people, right? And so it might take a lot for us to get to the point where we feel like, oh, this is too much, or oh, I am overwhelmed. Um, but for some people, it's those moments where you find yourself being really irritable about something that really isn't a big deal, right? Or your response to something is not in line with what is actually being experienced, or um, you're finding yourself just having irrational thoughts or
Mhm.
distorted thoughts about how people are interacting with you or how they're showing up in your life. Those are definitely signs of trauma.
Yeah. And so, how does it manifest in our relationships? Like, if we're in a relationship, what's a sign that, maybe we're being triggered by something else and that we have some other work that we need to do that's outside of even just dealing with that particular individual?
Yeah. Um, I think there's a lot of different signs. One of the things that I was thinking about is just like being super cautious and super suspicious of people,
Mm,
and finding yourself like um, questioning like people's intentions when you don't even know if they are intending to do anything with you or to you,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, you know, looking at everyone as if they fit in the same box,
Yes.
and trying to protect yourself from things that you don't even know whether they are um, a if you need to protect yourself from, right? I think one of the things that comes up in relationships, especially when we're talking about this idea of distrust and this idea of like not knowing if people can hold space for you, is that we're moving throughout life in a protective mode because of the messages that we have been told over and over again, right?
Yeah.
um, and when you're living your life in a protective mode, you're also not allowing yourself to have the opportunity for things that you don't need to protect yourself from. You're not
Mm,
allowing yourself opportunity for joy. You're not allowing yourself opportunity for love. You're not allowing yourself opportunity to be vulnerable and for people to hold space for you, right? And so we got to be try to be cautious of and aware of how that is impacting our ability to be in relationship
yeah.
with people.
Wow. So that's, I mean, that's huge because when you think about like walking around like in protective mode, because a lot of people, because of childhood things or just life, I mean, ooh, life can be crazy. And everybody has
Yeah.
probably experienced something traumatic to varying degrees. Like you said, we all have different tolerance levels. And so you develop
Yeah.
that resilience. We often call it resilience, and this resilience is so, so great, and everybody should learn to be more resilient. But it sounds like it's possible for you to get to a point where it's you've got these barriers and these walls up and that other people can't even get in even if they have the capacity and they're trying to, but you're like,
Right.
no, no, no,
Yeah.
not gonna let it happen.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And you're interacting with people in a way that um keeps them from doing the things that you say you want them to do.
Yeah.
Right? If you're saying you want people to be able to allow you to be vulnerable, or you want people to be able to give you space to process things that are difficult, or you want people to be able to give you support and encouragement, but you're at every moment you're pushing them away because you're unsure of their intentions, or you think that because they are doing this they want something from you, or because they're doing like are they too good? If they doing too
Yeah.
much, so maybe this is the sign that's telling me that this ain't the
Right.
one, right?
Yeah.
There's so much distrust underneath all of that that we can't even accept when someone might be just a genuine
Hmm.
person. It takes a lot. They have to show a lot of evidence that that's who they are.
Right. And so how much of that distrust is about them versus us not trusting ourselves?
Yeah. Yeah, that's real, right? A lot of times that distrust is really about us. It has nothing to do with the other person because we are not even basing the distrust on how they're showing up.
Yeah.
We're basing the distrust on our past experiences,
Okay.
on the messages that we've heard, on the examples that we've seen of other men supporting and encouraging, black
Mm-hmm.
women. So it is really about us
Yeah.
and us being open to um, the opportunity that someone could give us something different than
And so how do we learn to trust ourselves again?
that is hard, right? It's hard.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of work. And the first thing that I think we need to do as women to start to trust ourselves is to be honest about how we feel, right?
Yeah.
And allow ourselves to sit in and feel what it is that we're struggling with.
Yeah.
A lot of times we're so busy being independent that we don't take the time to process what's going on for us. We're moving every day, all day, doing something, being here for this person, being here for that
Mm-hmm.
person, trying to climb the ladder of success, trying to make sure that we are, presenting in a certain way that we don't usually allow ourselves those times and those moments to just kind of sit with what we're feeling and be honest about that with ourselves.
Yeah.
So that's the first step.
Yeah. Because I think so often for us, and even I know from personal experience, like we are conditioned to compartmentalize everything. Like if you grew up in the church, there's a certain way you're supposed to behave in the church, and the way that people in church will say you're supposed to present. If you
Yep.
work in a corporate environment with predominantly white men, there's a certain way and mentality that you have just that you have to survive in that environment.
Yeah.
And then when you think
Yeah.
about with your family and then your friends and then your partner,
Hmm.
it's like every place you go, you feel like you have to show up and highlight
Yeah.
different parts of yourself or you have to suppress. I think, and even when I think about myself, like for me, even just maybe suppressing certain parts of myself, I get to show up as Charlene every place, but in this setting, okay, I can't be maybe as outgoing or I can't be as blunt. I can't say what I really feel or respond in the way that I
Hmm.
really feel because that's not going to be accepted in this particular environment. And that takes a
Yeah.
toll on you. And over time,
Yeah.
you it's harder for you to keep in mind and connect with what is it that really matters for you? Like,
Yeah.
to a degree, you're not moving authentically, but it is
Mhm.
authentically because you've been conditioned that this is how you're supposed to be in this particular
Supposed to
setting.
be.
And it's like, can I just
Yeah.
show up and say what, be me all the time, everywhere?
Yeah. Yeah. And we can't. We feel like we can't, right? We're not given the permission or the room to do that.
Yeah.
And it is exhausting. And I think even in that exhaustion that shows up in relationships too. Like we don't have time for a whole lot of BS.
No.
you know. And because of the distrust and also the exhaustion, when you present yourself to a black woman and you are presenting in a way that seems disingenuous or not real or inauthentic, we can sense that most
Yeah.
times, right? And so our meter is going off all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes we are very short with it. We'll shut you down in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? I don't got time for the BS. Never mind.
Yeah.
I can do it by myself. Never mind.
Oh, yeah. What is it? I can do bad all by myself.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And so that I think that exhaustion kind of lends to that shortness and that lack of kind of giving people a chance sometimes
Yeah.
because we would rather not deal.
Yeah. And I'm seeing that a lot now. Like a lot of women who are just like, I'm too tired. I don't even want to be bothered.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Yeah.
know again, and I use personal examples a lot because I don't I don't want to share other people's stories. And so I'm like, I'll
Yeah.
share mine to the degree that
Yeah.
I'm comfortable with.
Yeah.
But I know that even for me, like, it's like, okay, I've got all these other things going on in my life. And I know that a relationship takes a lot. It
Yeah.
requires a lot. And it's been perfectly fine for me to say for the past year or so, I don't want to be bothered with one.
Yep.
Because the level of discernment and the level of vulnerability that you have to be willing to extend. And I think the
Yes.
first thing is we have to determine, are you in a place where you can give that?
Mm-hmm.
Because I also see some women who don't ask themselves that question, and they get out here and they want to date and they want to meet, and they would get with a guy and they're not ready to even try to do the work. And it's like, now you're becoming a project for
Mm-hmm.
him, and you're going to be
Mm-hmm.
frustrated because he's not going to give you what you need because you weren't ready to get in that relationship to begin with. So like you said, we got to be real. It's okay if you're
Yeah.
not ready to invest in that. And
Mm-hmm.
if that's the case, but you want to, if you want to hook up and have a bed buddy, or if you just want to have somebody to go eat with sometimes and go kick it with, like,
Yep.
be real about what you're looking for.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's okay to do that. I think
Yeah.
for so long we didn't get permission to say
Yes.
that. We
Yes.
got labeled a hoe. If you're like,
Yes.
this is all I want is sex, that's it.
Right.
And it's like, you, sis, tell them that, tell them that, because
Yeah.
maybe then men will, the men who do lie will stop lying and pretending they
Yes.
want relationships because
And be
everybody
okay
can
with
just
it.
be out in the open.
Right. Exactly. I think that's a really great point. And, to your point about like that's how you feel and that's what's coming up for you, I can totally agree with that. I feel the same way. I just don't have time. I kind of like being by myself. I enjoy being able to get
Yeah.
up and go when I want to and
Yeah.
hang out with my friends or just do what I want to do. Go take a trip and
Mhm.
not have to say to nobody I'm going out of town.
Yeah.
I enjoy that, and a lot of my other friends are in the same boat. Um, but I think sometimes when we tell people that, sometimes people think that we're just saying that because
Yeah.
we're not getting anybody looking for us or ain't nobody checking
Yeah.
for you, so you saying you're okay with it.
Yeah.
No,
Mm-mm.
actually not. you
Yeah.
know but I can be honest with myself and say I don't have the capacity to be in a relationship with someone right now at this point in my life. I
Yeah.
like my life the way that it is, and that doesn't mean that I don't want to hang out or have fun or date, but I
Yes.
don't have the capacity to be in a committed relationship, and
Yes.
for me that's okay.
Yes. And I love that we're having those conversations now because
Hmm.
I'm seeing more than ever, because and people have to we have to really look back at the way things were to understand kind of the reason things are the way they are, because
Yeah.
for a long time it wasn't, people got married because that was the only socially acceptable way to have sex.
Right.
You know,
Yes.
yeah, people loved each other too, but like it was security and
Yeah.
social acceptance that drove
Yep.
people to get married.
Mm-hmm.
Now you ain't got to be married to do all that. And
Right.
so people can actually have more authentic relationships with themselves
Yeah.
because they get to explore and learn, and I think it takes for a long time for you to be able to identify what it is you even want,
Yeah.
and even more importantly what you can give to a partner.
Yeah.
Because honey, the stuff I said like in my 20s, like, oh, I want to be married and I want to have all these kids, and I
Mm-hmm.
had no idea
Mm-hmm.
what being being somebody's partner meant,
Yeah.
like what it would meant to truly support somebody even when you're not feeling like it,
Yeah.
because sometimes you need to do that. You gotta try to find the energy and the compassion for your partner when you tired, when
Mm-hmm.
they complaining about this job they don't like, but you don't
Mm-hmm.
want to hear about this mess because they keep complaining about it and you sick of hearing it. But
Yep.
sometimes you gotta suck it up and listen and say, baby, you got this, and blah 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 blah.
Yep.
But you
Yeah.
don't know how you're going to be able to show up and do that and fit it in with your life until you're in those situations. You don't
Yeah.
really know what your quote unquote type is, what your non negotiables are, until
Yes.
you live some life. And so I
Yeah.
think we put, to your point earlier when you talked about shame,
Mm-hmm.
I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to be ready to show up for
Yeah.
situations that we are uninformed and unequipped to
Yep.
be in.
Yep. Yeah. I think you're right. I mean, it's also to like your point about like not knowing what even you want in a relationship. What are your needs? What are the things that you want to make sure your partner knows about, how they can support you, how you need them to show up for you, how you need them to show care for you, how you need them to love you, right? Like
Yeah.
we need to tell people how to love us because everybody's love language and the way that they want people to show love to them is different. You can't, it's not a one size fit all. You can't
Right.
show me love the same way you showed the last woman love because we are not the same,
Right.
right? And then on the other hand of that, you change and evolve as women, as men, and so then your love languages change also. And so just
Hmm.
because I've been with you for 10 years and back then I needed you to show me love in this way, now I need you to do something different because my needs are different, right? I've changed, I've evolved, I've grown, and I need things shown differently, right? But if you don't have the ability to be vulnerable enough to share that with your partner, if you don't trust that they can alter or change the way that they show up for you, then you end up being in a relationship with someone who doesn't know how to love you.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, even in what you just said, I was like, oh, Lord, relationships, so much work. Because you mentioned, like, it changes.
Yeah.
You know, life, we transition. You might, as we grow older, even if you have kids, if you
Yeah.
change jobs,
Hmm.
like, all these different things happen in life. And then we just evolve.
Right.
And like you said, our needs will change. And I appreciate that you said we have to tell them,
Yes.
because I hear a lot of women say, well, he should just know. As long as we've been together, he
Hmm.
should be able to figure me out,
Hmm.
or he should
Hmm.
just know.
Yeah. Yeah. They don't just know.
Yeah.
They don't just know. And they end up trying to treat you in the same way that they treated the last woman because that's what she liked, or that's
Yeah.
what worked for her,
Yeah.
or that's what worked for you 10 years ago, so that's what should continue to work for you.
Hmm.
um, but it doesn't, you
Yeah.
know. And then when we are conditioned to not be vulnerable and to be this super independent superwoman person, then sometimes it feels like, well, maybe I shouldn't have needs. Maybe I should just be okay with,
Yeah.
what they're able to give,
Hmm.
right? And then that creates another level of conflict or struggle or, disconnection between you and your partner.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, yeah, because I've heard women say that too, that their partners have told them that they expect too much or they're too demanding. And and so what are your thoughts on that? Like, is it a question of that person being too demanding, or is it a capacity? Like, what's going on there when people perceive someone to be too demanding?
Yeah. I think it depends on delivery, right? I can tell someone what my needs are and what I expect from them in a way that allows for them to have discussion with me,
Yeah.
or I can say either you gonna give me this or I'm gone, right? So I think that's maybe part of the difference.
Yeah.
And also it could be a capacity issue, like you were saying. If I'm telling you what I need and you know you can't give it to me, and instead of you saying I'm sorry, I don't think I have the ability to give that to you, you blaming it on me as if I'm being unreasonable,
Right.
right? So then it's also a idea of like what's their level of being vulnerable with you to say that they can't do something.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to make sure people in the audience understand like what vulnerability means and what vulnerability looks like, because we use that word a
Yeah.
lot, and a lot of people, they really don't know. Like, people associate, and for a long time, by people I'm talking about me.
Yeah.
For a long time I associated vulnerability with somebody who was really needy,
Hmm.
really emotional and clingy. Like, I need somebody to be with me all the time and like coach me along. So what do we mean when we're talking about vulnerability in relationships? And can you provide some examples of what vulnerability looks like?
Yeah. I think vulnerability in relationship again starts with being honest with yourself, right? Um, Understanding what it is that you expect, what you will accept, what is important to you, and what your needs are, and then being
Hmm.
able to express that to another person in a way that they can receive it,
Yeah.
right? And trusting that you you providing that information is not going to be used against you or taken advantage of.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So an example of vulnerability would be, you know, let me try to think of one. Um, Going back to what we said about like the idea that as you change and grow and evolve as a woman, your needs change, grow, and evolve, right? And so an example of vulnerability in that would be being honest enough to say to your partner, I know that for the last 10 years, the way that you have shown love to me has been X, Y, and Z. That worked
Hmm.
then. It does not work for me any longer. These are the things that I need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we probably have to have workshops to
Yeah.
learn how to say what it is we
Yeah.
need, because I see all the memes with, and just the conversations that women have about being unhappy in relationships, whether it comes to like how he's helping with the children
Hmm.
or how he's helping around the house
Yeah.
or even their sexual
Hmm.
needs. But we're not being explicit
Yeah.
and communicating. And a lot of times, and this is just something that I've observed, a lot of times we don't even give them a chance to try to do it.
Right. Yeah.
Like, especially when we talk about like responsibilities around the
Yeah.
home and just in our lives. Like, it's that protective mode that you mentioned earlier. It's like we assume you're not going to show up, so I'm not even going to mention it. I'm just going to take care of it myself. I'm going to take care of everything in the house. I'm going to feed these kids. I'm going to bathe them. I'm going to clean the house. I'm going to do everything. And then I'm going to be upset
Hmm.
that you're not doing
Hmm. Hmm.
anything.
And then I'm not going to tell you that I'm upset. I'm just going to bang things around in the house. Or every time you
Yeah.
try to touch me, I'm going to say, no, go on about your business.
Yep.
Those kinds of things. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It can create
Yeah.
a level of conflict that doesn't necessarily need to be there. Right. Um, but as you were talking, I was just thinking, we've been talking a lot about like how women are socialized and how that impacts relationships. But I want to just kind of point out that also in the idea that it's hard for us to be vulnerable, it's hard for men to be vulnerable too, right? And
Yes.
because they're socialized to not show emotion, to not be seen as weak, to,
Yep.
always uphold the masculine role, right? And if
Hmm.
we are, um, and because we're socialized to just be strong, it's like we're fighting against each other, right? Like I can't show
Yeah.
you that I'm vulnerable and you can't show me that you're vulnerable. And so now it's like, well, in order for me to be in a relationship with you, somebody gotta win here. Right?
Yep.
Like I gotta win. Either you
Yep.
gonna be vulnerable with me or I don't know what's gonna happen, right? And
Yep.
then it's like, but when you're fighting against each other, nobody wins in a relationship.
Yeah.
And
And I'm glad that you mentioned that because I mean, I've done a few episodes just with
mm-hmm,
guys so that they could talk about their
mm-hmm,
needs and things that men deal with. And especially black men, when we talk about the whole concept of masculinity, and I know everybody loves to talk about like toxic masculinity and everything, but I don't personally necessarily subscribe to that. I think a lot of things that we call toxic masculinity are things that are rooted in white
mm,
supremacy and misogyny that has derived from
yeah,
that. But the idea of men in general, like you said, they don't get to show emotion. They get to show passion about sex and sports,
right. Yep,
and their toughness, like I can protect my things, like I can
yep,
fight, I am strong. But like passion in terms of like being vulnerable and saying like, hey, I really love you, but I don't know how to love
right.
you. Because at the same time, it's the same. A lot of us, we don't grow up seeing healthy
Yeah,
relationships. And if you don't grow up seeing that being modeled, and if you haven't gone to see somebody like Therapist Tiff and you haven't worked with and done that work,
yeah,
you really don't know. You're practicing,
yes,
and you gonna probably do some damage along the way or have some damage inflicted on
yeah,
you. So they're in the same
yeah,
boat as us in terms of just trying to figure out how to navigate this. But unfortunately, for a lot of men, they don't even have the invitation to say, I'm
yeah,
scared. I don't know what I'm
right.
doing. Like, I want this. I just don't know how to build this. I don't know how to
Right.
maintain this. And they may not even have the
Yeah,
words because we teach them from a time they're a kid. Little boys fall and we're like, don't
yeah,
cry. You're a big
yep,
boy. You're a big boy. You're my little
yep,
man. Don't cry.
yeah, yeah,
This doesn't go away. Like we want them to be open and vulnerable as men, but we don't allow them to be that as
right.
boys.
Yeah. And then think about what happens when they do try to be open and vulnerable. We get to calling them soft and all those other kinds of things that, then they got to be back in
Yeah.
protective mode again,
Yep.
right?
And other people are always watching how we treat other
Yeah.
people. Like I've become so much more cognizant of that, especially I think just seeing like social
Mhm.
media, because there have been several prominent celebrity men who have, cried about stuff on
Yeah.
social media or talked about their
Mhm.
feelings, and they become the
Mhm.
meme. And you see the
Yep.
comments, and you also look at the men that people call
Mhm.
soft, like
Mhm.
Sierra's husband. For some reason, so many people love to call him soft and a simp, and I'm like, this dude loves his family. He constantly professes his love for his family. We call him
Right.
soft all the time. People have called Will Smith soft even before the whole
Right.
Oscars thing. He's been called soft since he was a rapper who didn't use
Yeah.
profanity. So it's like other guys see how we react to the
Yeah.
guys who aren't like hardcore, tough, super
Yeah.
aggressive. And they're being conditioned also, like you said, sometimes that conditioning is
Yeah.
implicit. It's not directly said, but they see how we respond to seeing men show emotion and love for their
Mhm.
families. And they're gonna respond accordingly because who wants to be a
Right.
joke?
Exactly.
Nobody.
Exactly. And because of that conditioning, like we're fighting against each other. We are men, black men and black women are conditioned in a way that because of the messages that we have received, it keeps us from
Yeah.
being able to be in some of these very committed, loving, successful relationships,
Yeah.
because those messages get too loud and they drown out the things that you really want to do.
Yeah. And so, how do we push through and under those messages to kind of change the narrative? Because we
Yeah.
do know, I see a lot of stats that people, I mean, marriage overall has rates have kind of
Yeah.
declined overall. It's not just amongst Black people, but, and I personally, I don't think that's a bad thing, because what the numbers tell us is that people are still getting married. They're just waiting. A lot of them are getting married later
Right.
in life. And so, like, what, as a family therapist, like, what do you think
Yeah.
about that? That people, about these marriage numbers, and we know when it comes to stats, they can be manipulated to show whatever you want
Yeah.
them to show. But what are your thoughts on the idea that people are still getting married? They're just doing it a little bit
Yeah.
later.
I mean, I don't see anything wrong with the people waiting to get married and
Yeah.
waiting a little bit later in life. It probably lends to more successful marriages, to be honest, because when you have lived some life, you to your point
Mm-hmm.
from earlier, like, you know what you want, you
Yeah.
know what's important to you, you know what you need, and you're more able to express that to someone. And
Yeah.
you have been able to, most times, maybe work out some of those things that have been struggles or challenges in other relationships, right? You've been
Yeah.
able to recognize, like, oh, I kind of do this when people do that. Maybe I should deal with that. Or I recognize that, I have a hard time, accepting love in this way. Maybe I should make sure that my partner knows that. Like, you learn the things that
Yeah.
come up for you in relationship, the longer you allow yourself time to process that, or recognize it.
Yeah.
So I think that the numbers of people waiting till later in life could lend to more successful relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I agree. Absolutely.
yeah, yeah,
And for people who want to be in a committed relationship at some point, what are some things that they can start doing
mm,
today to get ready to have a fulfilling, healthy relationship?
yeah,
Whether that's marriage or just, a monogamous relationship, or, whatever their how they define their relationship.
yeah.
What are some things people can do to make that healthy and fulfilling
Um,
during their single season?
yeah, yeah. I think you can be honest with yourself. Start to recognize what your needs are, um, and take the time to express to the people that you love and the people that you want to love you, um, how you need to receive love, right?
Yeah.
um, you can try to separate your past experiences from the people who are you're in relationship with currently, and try to take a look at, like, not what I've learned from my past relationships, but what's the evidence that this person in front of me is showing me that can tell me whether I can trust them or not, that I whether I can be vulnerable with them or not. Um, a lot of times, as we talked about, like, we take all of our past stuff and we just kind of lump it all together, and we use that to kind of inform the way we interact with people. But if you can take a step back from that and really look at each person individually, and that's not to say to lose all your past experiences, but to use the evidence that's being shown in front of you to say, okay, well, I've learned in the past that, you know, I need this, that, or the other thing from my partner. This person is showing me that. Maybe that says that I can give them a little more than maybe I would have given someone else. Right?
Yeah.
Um, I think that the idea of being an independent Black woman, you can, it's a good character trait, right? Like, it's a good character trait to be independent and not need to depend on anyone, right? But
Yeah.
independence is something that you can choose when and how to implement. And so it doesn't have to be an all or nothing thing. You can
Yeah.
be independent and still allow someone space to care for you. Um,
Yeah.
and then the last thing that I will kind of say about that is, like, giving yourself permission to be present and vulnerable in a relationship, and allowing yourself the opportunity to see if someone is worthy of that from you.
Yeah. I love that. And so, how can a therapist help with all of that? Because for a lot of folks, they probably like, "Ooh, I don't even know where to begin." Damn. So, like, how does a therapist help? How can they help with this?
Yeah. I think there's lots of different ways therapists can help with that, and it kind of depends on the type of therapist that you have, right? Um,
Yeah.
but and what you present in therapy, right? So if you come into therapy just saying like, I just struggle in relationships, but you're not willing to talk about how that looks or how it plays out, then it can be difficult.
Hmm.
But if you're coming to therapy and you're honest with your therapist and you know what you want to work on, your therapist can help you really identify some of those messages that you received growing up about who you should be and how you should present in relationships, and be able to break them down and maybe dispel some of the myths that were created in those messages, right? um
Yeah.
a therapist can also help you process some of the trauma that maybe informs the behavior that you have in relationships, and really help you to kind of see how those events go together, and
Yeah.
help you to identify maybe some coping skills or some ways of checking that for yourself, right?
Yeah.
A therapist can help you really get connected to the feelings that you have about being in relationship. Really help you
Hmm.
to um, take a look at the ways in which you have shown up in relationship that works and ways that don't work,
Yeah.
right? Help you look at some of those maybe uncomfortable or distorted thoughts that you might have about relationships based on your experiences, and be able to take a look at how you might need to shift those thought processes if you want to allow relationship in your life. Um,
Yeah.
and learn to trust yourself, you know, trust your own
Yeah.
intuition, trust your own ideas about who you are and who you want to be, without the ideas that have been placed upon you.
Yeah. Those are all huge. And it's great that people don't have to tackle it
Hmm.
alone. You've got therapists offer a safe
Yes.
space for you to go and completely, like, all the parts of you, your ratchet
Yes.
side,
Yes.
your scary, sad side, all that. Like, you can bring all that in there. You don't have to be all together or anything. Like, you can be
Yeah.
you. You can be
Yeah.
you. That's the great thing about therapy spaces.
Therapy is the place where you don't have to hide anything. There's nothing off
Yeah.
limits. There's nothing that you could say that most therapists would struggle with. We heard it all, you
Mhm.
know.
Yeah.
And you can use your therapy space for what you need it for, right?
Yeah.
If you just need a safe place to cry, if you need a safe place to just
Mhm.
talk about the things that you can't talk about with anyone else, if you need a safe place to talk about the thoughts that come up that scare you, that therapy is the place to do it.
Yeah. Wonderful. And so, how can people work with you? Can you tell us a little bit about your services and whether they're virtual and what states you're
Mhm.
licensed in and all that good stuff?
Yeah. So if you are in Pennsylvania or Minnesota and you're looking for a therapist, I might be the girl for you. I'm licensed in both states. I provide individual, family, and couples therapy. Also, if you are a clinician and you are working on being licensed, I am a AAMFT approved supervisor. So you can reach out to me for clinical supervision. I can help you along that licensure process. I also have a lifestyle line that includes products that, were created with a vision to motivate, inspire, and celebrate healing across the culture, right? Um, we don't do that enough. And, what better way
No.
than to wear a t shirt or, a hat or
Yeah.
have a mug while you're in your Zoom meetings that celebrate the work that you're
Yeah.
doing towards your healing?
I love that. Yes. And we should. We have to celebrate all our
Yes.
wins. Like, a lot of times we think I'll celebrate when I graduate or when I hit that
Mm-hmm.
goal. But you know what? There's a lot of small milestones along the way to the big
Yep.
day. And we got to celebrate all of them because they
Yeah.
all count.
And healing is not easy. It's not an easy process. You're gonna have days where you like, I ain't even trying to see that therapist today. I don't want to do none of that work. I don't want to do no homework. You're gonna have those days, but if you have like tangible reminders that tell you
Yeah.
to celebrate the work that you're doing, and also
Hmm.
show other people that the work that you're doing is worth it, especially black people. We don't
Hmm.
get told that therapy is a thing for us to do. It's not
Yeah,
widely expressed. Now it's getting better. It is
hmm,
getting better.
it is.
But if we can promote it through all the different ways that we express ourselves through fashion and art and all of those things,
Yeah.
it will make the message louder.
Yes. And in our relationships, I mean, we know that the quality of our relationships directly impacts every other
Yes.
area of our life. Like if you have, and not just intimate ones, but if you have
Hmm.
stressful or, triggering interactions with your relatives, or if you're a solo person, but
Yeah.
you're lonely because you really want to have relationships with people, but you don't know
Yeah.
how for a variety of reasons, like that impacts every other thing, how you making
Yes.
your money, how you're going to look and show
Hmm.
up in the world, how you feel on the inside. So it's so important for us just to even just learn how to navigate healthy relationships and figure out what you need in those
Yes.
relationships.
Yes. And remember that the most important that you have in this world is your relationship with you. And so if you can't be honest with
Yep.
yourself, and if you can't allow yourself the room and the space to deal with the things that have been challenging for you, how can you expect someone else to do it?
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't expect somebody else to submit to you or commit to you if you can't do those
Right.
things for yourself.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
And you can't expect
absolutely.
someone else to show up for you in ways that you're not willing to show up for yourself.
Yeah. That whole we teach people how to treat us by
Yep.
what we show them. Yeah, what we show them and what we tell them, but people watch how we treat ourselves, and that sends
Yep.
loud
And if
messages.
we're too busy being too independent to show someone that we need someone to care for us, or we want someone to care for us in a certain way, why would they show up in that way?
That part. Because honestly, a lot of men have said, I don't know if you've heard this even with your clients, that they feel like their partners don't need them.
Yeah. Yes.
They don't, they're like, you got these, she's got everything. Like, you've got your money, you have a great job, you have a home. Or, like, what do I bring to the table?
Right.
And amongst other women, we'll say, well, I need all kind of things from him.
Mm-hmm.
All these emotional things is usually what we're
Yep.
emphasizing,
Right.
but we're not telling them specifically what we need or even how it feels when they give us those things. So, like, some people will say, like for me, I'm learning how to be more comfortable with telling people specifically what I need. But
Yeah.
another way that I can do that is to affirm when I receive what I need.
Yeah.
So if somebody's calling and checking on me or acknowledging something about like I'm a fur mom, so I have one cat now. I used to have two. But whenever somebody asks about my fur babies, like that makes my day because
Yeah.
those are like my kids. So acknowledging that they are, that's important to me
Yeah.
is special. And so I say, you know what, thank you. I appreciate that you always ask about my babies. That makes me feel good,
Yeah.
or when you do this, it makes me feel good. And so if you're not comfortable with specifically saying, like, hey, do this, and this. Even if we affirm when people do the things, like I think you have to do a combination of both because sometimes you'll
Mm-hmm.
have to explicitly tell people what you need.
Yeah.
But I think we also have to do a better job of just acknowledging when we receive what we need. Like people like that praise.
Yeah.
And that's how because we all want to hear that,
Yeah.
that we're doing a great job.
Yeah.
So if you tell them when they're doing a great job and show appreciation, you're probably going to get that more
Yeah.
because who doesn't want to be told how awesome they
Right.
are?
Right. And I think you're right. Like sometimes we don't even know what we need, right? We don't even know what
Yeah.
it is that feels good to us, because maybe we never felt it before, or we
Yeah.
don't take the time to sit with it or
Hmm.
acknowledge it. And when someone does something that feels good to you, you're right. I
Hmm.
may not have the words to tell you that that's what I like, but when you do it, I can recognize that I like when you do that. That makes me feel
Yep.
cared for. It makes me feel loved. It makes me feel supported. All of those kinds of things that you can give feedback to the person that's showing you those things.
Yeah.
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 Wow. Is there anything you'd like to leave the audience with before we wrap up?
I think I would just like to leave people with um, a thought around making sure that you take care of yourself, and that you give yourself time and space to process what you're feeling and what you need and what's important to you, and sharing that with people who deserve that information.
That part.
Yep.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you.
And can you share your website, social media info? I'll also have it in the description box, but I always like to have it mentioned in the episode too.
Yes. So on Instagram, I am therapist_Tiff. And my website is www.therapisttiffllc.com.
Thank
Thank you.
you. Thank you for all the work you do every day, helping people along with their healing journey. And thank you for chatting with me
Thank
today.
you.
And everybody, all the description or the contact info for Therapist Tiff will be in the description box on YouTube and on the podcast apps. So thank you
Thank you
again,
so
Therapist Tiff.
much.
And I'm Charlene Ketchum. And thank you. We'll see you all next time.
Bye.